Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for the CIC lecture. Our speaker today will be Shervin Assari. Shervin is an associate professor of family medicine and urban public health at Charles R. Drew University, one of 4 historically Black medical schools in the US. He is a social epidemiologist who studies the intersection of race and socioeconomic status on Americans' physical and mental health over the course of the lifespan. His main contribution is Marginalization-related Diminished Returns, MDRs, which seek to explain how structural racism and associated social stratification deteriorate the health and well-being of middle-class families of color. The theory goes beyond studying health disparities that are attributed to poverty and low socioeconomic status, and explains why health inequalities persist across the full spectrum of socioeconomic status and social class. With over 18 years of postgraduate research experience, Dr. Assari has authored over 400 peer-reviewed papers, is an elected fellow of the American Academy of Health Behavior, AHB, New York Academy of Medicine, NYAM, and Society of Behavioral Medicine, the SBM. So Shervin, with that said, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm very much looking forward to your talk, and I'd love to have you take it away.
I appreciate the invitation and also the opportunity. So thank you very much. Hi, everyone, from sunny LA. So I don't know your weather there, but it's great here. The report or the result that I'm summarizing here are mainly on like experience of 4 or 5 years of extracting different data sets, mostly national data sets, to see if not only when we control for socioeconomic status, race has a residual effect, but when we look at the effect of socioeconomic status, can we see anything that reflects a structural racism? Meaning that in the US, as you know, people say the bootstrap, like people should behave, should marry, should educate themselves. So the question if Black and other racial and ethnic groups do all those things that are like in the recipe, what is the outcome? And you will see that the outcome is not extremely positive under racism. So this is marginalization-related diminished return. So a few disclosures. First of all, I haven't collected any of the data I'm reporting. It's all existing data. It's also, I use the term Black when I'm referring to African-American, Caribbean Black immigrants, because most of the data sets that I am using to report this have collected data on race, not ethnicity. And of course, there are huge differences within racial categories, but we don't have that much detailed data on that. The last thing I want to say is that I see race as a sociological factor, not biology. So in the next hour, you will hear a lot of Black-white differences, Blacks diminished return. This is nothing related to biology, genes, or anything of that sort. It's the way I am approaching it is social forces reducing or generating Black-white differences. So the data sets that I have used and also the support I have received are mainly supported by NIH. So these are the NIH funding. And then last 4 or 5 slides are from ABCD. And as you may know, ABCD is like provided by a consortium, big and high number of fundings. So I need to acknowledge all the great support that ABCD is providing for this data collection. So this is the theory paper I published in 2018. The idea is each resource, economic resource, or psychological asset, which in the textbooks, we expect them to generate outcomes like education generating health and education reducing depression. would have systematically smaller return in terms of economics and health for any non-white group, any marginalized group broadly defined. So this is the theory. As you see, so in this, when I'm explaining this phenomenon, I'm talking about a resource and an outcome. And for resource, it goes beyond socioeconomic resource and also includes assets, like if you have a good emotion regulation, or even age as an asset. So you will, I don't have all of the papers in this presentation, but for example, in a clinical setting, there are, like, aspirin is supposed to be prescribed based on the age of the patient. So the older adults are supposed to get aspirin or some screening. You would even see diminished return of age of the patient in an encounter between a patient and a physician. So those things that are supposed to work as a resource generally reduce less the expected outcomes because of the marginalization. And regarding the outcomes, from mortality, which is a hard outcome, to depression and income and where you live. So high income people still are exposed to gang members in their neighborhood. So it's all health, physical health outcomes, mental health outcomes, and process outcomes. These are more than 20 studies, mostly nationally representative, which that means they apply sample weight, so you can use their data and then generalize the findings to the US. To give you examples of the studies that I have used, like Ad Health or Americans Changing Life, ACL, or ABCD study, or PATH, the tobacco, very famous tobacco study, or Health and Retirement Survey, or General Social Survey. So this is a summary of marginalization-related diminished returns. On left, you have different resources, and on the right side, you have the outcomes, and you connect those resources to the outcomes, and diminished return can be seen for all of these lines that I have. So all of these lines have a supporting publication in the field suggesting that, for example, employment differently reducing mortality for Black and white people. So that means Black people get a job, but because the job quality is not great, their protective hazard ratio of having that job on likelihood of death is smaller, weaker. The protection is smaller because of the racism or race. Okay, here. Why this is relevant? Because most of the health disparity literature has looked at the inequalities in a mediational way. So in a statistical term, the framework has used a mediation model. So like, if I'm Black and I die sooner than later than other people, it is because I am discriminated, I have low income, I don't get the good employment, and so forth. So there is a third factor explaining, in a statistical term, mediating the reason. So it's like race or ethnicity or LGBT status predicts outcome. So it is famous theoretical framework for this mediational explanation is fundamental cause theory by Link and Phelan, and also Michael Marmot's social determinants of health framework. So you access the resource, then you can protect yourself. If you don't have access to that, your outcome is worse. So these two major frameworks are based on differential exposures. However, there might be also differential effects that might work, goes under this category. But Again, the dominant section of the differential effect in literature on health disparity argues that if you are at the bottom of the society, you are more vulnerable to the risk factor or the presence of resource on the outcome. So the argument, like double jeopardy hypothesis or multiple jeopardy or double disadvantage hypothesis, is if you are a non-white person, you are vulnerable to the additional risk or resource. My findings, supported by all those papers, suggest that it is totally reverse. That the idea is, if you provide the same level of education, the wealthy person gets most of the education, not the poor. So that is like a very humbling message for policymakers, that it is not, we don't have a vulnerable population that are ready for our help. And if we add any resource, the effect of that resource would be larger. Unfortunately, because of the structural stuff, if that section in the down part of the society, it's very difficult to modify their outcomes unless you change the whole system. So fundamental cause theory, social determinants of health, and double jeopardy, multiple jeopardy, they do not suggest that there is a differential effect to the disadvantage of marginalized people. So that is the contribution of marginalization-related diminished return. This is another reason this is important. Okay, the recipe, one of the most acknowledged or accepted recipes for upward social mobility, if you are born poor or born to a poor family, is generated by Brookings Institution, which is a leftist think tank. And they say, if you do these three things and you are born to poor family, you can still go up. Get a job, get an education, and don't do childbearing in an early life development, like teenager or before marriage. So these three advices. So let's see. These papers that I am showing, because I am covering like 50, 60 papers. For many parts of my presentation, I'm not going to the tables. So I'm just referring to just a picture of the paper. So if you get education, if you get an employment, so forget the quality of education and forget the quality of employment. And if you marry, those have all of those three resources would have diminished return on life expectancy of Americans over the next 25 years. So these are the papers. So that recipe doesn't necessarily work unless you say, also, if the society doesn't systematically discriminate you, if the quality of education is also good, if the quality of occupation is also good. So it is not that easy that get a job. It's like get a white job, get a white education. So here are other reasons for this argument against like that simplistic recipe. In the fragile families dataset, which is an ongoing study of around 4,500 families at risk. By families at risk, they mean either low income, racial ethnic minority, or unwed families. And this is a cohort of birth. So 4,500 births being followed till age 15. So to the age 15, the data is public, the data are public, and I have used it. So let's see if white moms decide to postpone their pregnancy and avoid teen pregnancy, and if Black moms do the same thing, what happens to their wealth? So you will see here that if you delay your pregnancy, you would gain overall from your delayed pregnancy in terms of wealth, but not much if you are Black. So here, this paper says, if you are at an at-risk family and you do a good decision to postpone your pregnancy, you are still penalized in terms of future wealth. So it is like very victim blaming if you say, why there is Black-white differences? Because the rate of marriage is different. Look at, or early pregnancy is too high in that community. So it is not that simple. Here is looking at the effect of education of the mom and low birth weight of the baby at the time of birth. And as you see, when education level of the mom goes up, low birth weight goes down. However, this is mainly true for white moms. Black moms with education still are giving birth to a low birth weight baby. So remember, I told you that this pattern is not specific to education and income as economic resources. They also hold for psychological assets. These are four papers that, again, these, if you, at surface, they are extremely upsetting, because if you, okay, this is the thing, in the literature, one of the main findings is self-rated health is a very strong protective factor and predictive of mortality. So when you control for all like lab data and clinical data, that single item of having a good self-rated health is protective for against your mortality, is mainly a white phenomenon in the United States. So Black people who report good health, they still die early. The same with depressive symptoms. We know depressive symptoms kills you through different mechanisms, heart disease, suicide, other things. The predictive role of depressive symptoms for your future life expectancy is much diminished in Black community. We know cognitive score. So the way you do, like you can do a math calculation, that is a strong predictor of mortality and life expectancy. That is also reduced protective factor for Black people. And finally, you know, usually health and happiness go together. So you are a healthy person, you are more likely to be a happy person. When you look at the largest social survey of the United States called GSS, and use the sample of like 50,000 people who are there, you will see that health is much more correlated with happiness for white people than Black people. So it is not only it keeps you alive, it better boosts your experience of living if you are white, not much if you are Black. So this is an example of Michigan resident. If you look at the income level and the likelihood of the people say, I am not very well regarding mental health. Again, it's a single item and it is a respected item. So there are many publications out there that this, like the good correlation between single item and long measures. And you see that for white people, as their income goes up, there is an enhancement or reduction of the chance that the person would say, my mental health is not good. But for Black people, it is nothing there. It's also to suggesting a reverse direction. And the slopes are significant for whites and non-significant for Black. So this is in Michigan data, adults in Michigan. How I report this, the statistical test behind it is usually this way. So in most cases, in the first model, I run a main effect model. And main effect model doesn't have interaction and includes all people. So you control for the main effect of race, you control for the main effect of that resource, and you look at the effect of resource on outcome. Here, it is, you see a protective effect of high income against odds of poor self-rated mental health. That is the odds ratio of 0.88. Then in the next setup, in the same pooled sample, all people, you do the identical model with one additional term, would be the interaction, statistical interaction between the race or the marginalization status and the resource. And you would see that, like a penalty, that this 1.29 suggests that there's a statistically significant difference in the gain or that the benefit that income gives to mental health of the white people compared to Black people, to the disadvantage of Black people. Then in the next part of my approach for most of these papers, then I look at white people separately and Black people, and I run the models differently, stratified models, and you will see a protective effect for white people and not a protective effect for Black people. Why I do all of those? Because if you only rely on a stratified model, because of imbalanced sample size, you don't have a statistical power for the marginalized group. So for that reason, a big part of my inference, I look at the stratified models, but my main inference is based on model 2, which suggests that statistical interaction is significant to the disadvantage, always to the disadvantage of the marginalized people. Okay, here is the paper. In National Survey of American Life Adolescent, which is the last study of last representative study of mental health of Black adults and youth in the United States. This study didn't go to white areas and just oversample Black people. This study redid the whole sampling and went to the areas with high and low Black density to find the real distribution of mental health problems in Black Americans. And this is the finding. For African American, this is African American, so we have Caribbean Black, African American. For African American boys, the boys who live in high income families are more, not less, likely to endorse diagnostic criteria for MDD for their lifetime, for their last year, and for the past 30 days. The past 30 days is not statistically significant. It is almost marginal, but for lifetime, because as you move to these more nuances, the power goes down because there is not much distribution there. But for lifetime MDD, depressive disorder, you see a positive association between family income and endorsement of MDD criteria for African American boys. That you cannot see that for Caribbean boys, Caribbean Black girls, or African American girls. So what makes a successful Black person at risk, poses a successful Black person at risk of depression? What is the mechanism? Okay, so let's look at the social processes that may explain some of this. One finding is, when you look at the protective effect of income against presence of gang in your neighborhood, you will see a larger protection of your income on your neighborhood quality and safety for white people and black people compared to black people. Why? Because it is more difficult for black people under discrimination that when they qualify, they go find a safe place to live. And there are it's not just all structural racism, there are other things too, but a big part of it is social stratification. So one reason is high income black families are still more likely than high income white people to be exposed to neighborhood risk. Like when you ask them, is there gang in your neighborhood? There are more high income black people who say yes. And this is a around 20-year longitudinal study of black youth from age 9, 15 years forward, who were living in, I think, Iowa versus Georgia. And we looked at if you are a part of a high income family, makes any difference if you are living in Georgia, which is a predominantly black area, and Iowa, which is a predominantly white area. And guess what? You see, high income predicts more depression in the future only if you live in Iowa, not in Georgia. So over a 15-year cohort study, there is at least some suggestion that income becomes a disadvantage for you if you are specifically exposed to people out of your racial category. Here is another paper. If you look at educational attainment and GPA, you will see that parental education, you will see that parental education boosts or improves the GPA of white kids much more than black kids. So black kids who live in middle-class families are still reporting an lower than expected GPA, but that is not the case for white kids. This is their BMI. So the blue line is the shape of the association between BMI and education, parental education. And as parental education enhances, there is also a linear enhancement, reduction of BMI for white kids, not for black kids. For black kids, it's just not that stable association and not that steep association. So you see that it is GPA, it is depression, it is almost any outcome that you look. And again, I am not showing you but there's like a statistical support for the difference between those two lines. If you look at the model 1, which is only education and the confounders and race, you will see the protective effect of parental education. But when you look at the interaction, you will see a penalty for the black people.
So Shervin, if I could just interrupt, I think we have a question from Lonnie.
Yes.
Thanks so much. I was wondering if any of the data sets you worked with looked at a variable of like discrepancy between education between parents and the individuals being studied, or for example, like if someone's first generation college student or something, we might see the educational attainment having a different impact than if somebody comes from a history of college attendees.
Okay, yes, first, this is an excellent question. I have done it and other people have done this. So the one that I have done is that I have shown that the predictive role of your parent education on your education is smaller, the boosting effect. Like your dad is highly educated, you are supposed to get a good education. That protective effect of your parent education on your education, which is your upward educational mobility. It is a subcategory of upward economic education, but mobility, but it is a specific to education. That boosting effect is smaller if you are black than white. That is one. The second one is that people have published a lot on differential effect of education on future income. And they have found that one big difference that education generates, the reason education generates much less income in the future is two things. First, that you get a good education, but your parent didn't. So you don't have those connections. So one reason, you cannot like use your social networks to get a good job if you are educated well. So that is one. And also living in poverty as a child is also explaining why when Black people get a good education, their income and many other outcomes don't get better. So yes, and again, some other people have published about Black psychological tax, that upward social mobility defined as the enhancement of your situation compared to your parents' situation regarding the same variable, right? Education or income is much more steep for the enhancement is larger for white people than Black people. And that is called Black psychological tax. So if you want to go up, you pay more tax, psychological tax, if you are non-white. So I don't know if I could answer, but there is a total good literature on that.
Thank you.
Sure. So this is not specific to mental health outcomes. My audience here is mainly brain researcher and mental health researchers, so I did my main focus on mental health. But if you look at the asthma, you see the same pattern. So high SES Black kids have asthma more than high SES white kids when you control for other things. For tobacco dependence in age like 15, Black kids, Black youth in highly educated families are more likely to have tobacco use or even tobacco dependence compared to their white counterparts. So if you rerun this in Asian Americans in the United States, you will see that the Asian American people who are smokers in the United States are not low-income Asian Americans, are high-income Asian Americans who smoke in the United States. So this is not just a phenomenon specific to Black people or Black kids and then disappears. It's because of marginalization. So I'm trying to convince you that it is probably beyond a behavioral path that then we can blame them. Then, oh, okay, go get an education. So it is the society that also penalizes you if you are deviating from the privilege in any terms. This is association of education, own education, and smoking for gay people versus straight people in the United States. Highly educated gay people are more likely to be smokers than highly educated straight people. My suggestion, you replicate this identical findings with quality of life, psychological distress, and obesity, BMI. So it is when you get discriminated against, people discriminate against you because of your skin color, because of your immigrant, because you have an accent. So the person who wants to discriminate you would continue to discriminate you if you are a highly educated Black person or a highly educated gay person. So for that reason, in the presence of marginalization, protective effect of these resources go down. So you find the same thing with immigrants. So own education is protective factor against smoking. But if you are an immigrant person in the United States, you are more likely to remain a smoker because of immigration as a proxy of marginalization. Okay, so it is also in passive smoking. So not only you are more likely to be a smoker, you are also more likely to work in a workplace that there is a smoker around you, and you are more likely to live in a household that someone else smokes. So highly educated, marginalized people not only are more likely to be smokers, are also more likely to inhale secondhand smoke. When you ask people that, do you recall being exposed to a tobacco advertisement? So do you recall, you show people tobacco ads and you ask them, have you seen this? Highly educated white people say, no, I have not seen this advertisement, tobacco advertisement. Highly educated Black and Latino people are more likely to say, yes, I have seen this. So that also suggests that they are living in an area that they might be specifically targeted based on their community, but they are also living in an area that is like closer to a place that advertises tobacco. When you ask, because again, why I am doing this? Because I want to get out of the victim blaming and say that it is really not them. So when you ask highly educated white person about risk associated with tobacco, the knowledge related to tobacco harm is very high in highly educated white people. Knowledge about tobacco harm is much lower in highly educated Black people. One reason probably because they received their education in low-resourced urban area, which provides worse schooling. When you look at white and Black kids and you explore if their parental SES differently correlates with substance use of their relatives, you see the same pattern. So a white kid living in high SES family doesn't have a lot of relatives who use substances. However, if you are a Black kid in a high SES family, more of your relatives are using substances. And then if you are, do you have a question? Oh, no. And if you have high education, you are being sent to a high quality school, but that effect of your parental education on your quality of school is racialized. So if you are high SES Black kids in the United States, you are more likely to attend worse school defined by social environments. Like they have asked, do people bring guns to school? Do people bring knives to school? Are there like garbage around your school? The quality, the social environment of the school is worse for high SES Black kids in the United States. Okay, so that was not, even if it was related to brain, it was like depression or anxiety or substance use. Now, over the past 2 years, I have used ABCD data, which is a 10-year cohort of 10,000 plus kids at age 10 with brain imaging intervals of 2 years. So I made it simple. So 10,000 kids around age 10. Now there are nuances like 9 and 10-year-old. And so what I have done, I haven't been able to wait. So this is a complete cohort or 5 years, 6 years, multiple brain imaging. I have used their cross-sectional data. Mainly, I started with the phenotype. Like I looked at the depressive symptoms or suicidal ideation to see if I can replicate, or trauma, to see if I can replicate what I have found outside ABCD, and then to see if I can relate it to brain imaging. These are publications with the predictor and the outcome. They are very simple papers. So they are, I don't think you are used to see these type of papers. In brain imaging, I know people do fancy like networking, vector value, I don't know, those type of things that is beyond my head. For me, as a public health scholar, I use simple regression because ABCD uses a nested nature of the data, because kids are sampled from families. So there is more than one kid in the ABCD family, which families are nested to centers, and centers are clustered to states, 15 states. So you need to do take care of the hierarchical nature of the data. I have taken care of that. But other than that, I have not done this based on like imaging approaches. So these are some of the work I have already published. With no exception, when you look, you connect in the ABCD study, a CS resource that I have connected to a health outcome, you see a disadvantage for Black people, Black kids compared to white kids. Here are a few examples. As your family income, so from here forward, it is a few ABCD papers. So as your family income goes up, you spend less time on a screen, like from TV to computer to phone. And that is the graph on top. So here is your family income goes up, the time you spend on a screen goes down. This is overall. This is in like 10,000 plus kids, age 9 and 10, who are nested within families and estates and so forth. But if you look at that, that is mainly a white phenomenon. When you look at Black kids, for Black kids, there is no much reduction. That means Black kids who are in high income families are still at additional risk of screen use. And that is also not only a Black thing, you also see it in Asian. It's not that bad, but you also see it. It's far ahead. So this is with inhibitory control. So the ABCD study has used resting state MRI, functional MRI, and resting state functional MRI, resting state, of course, a structural MRI, and then task-based MRI. And also, so because they have done task, we also have, regardless of the imaging part, we have the statistics related to task. So this inhibitory control has used SST task of the, so to see how well they press or they not press a button where they are not supposed to press that button. So the inhibitory control enhances when the education of your parent is good, is high, but that is mainly, again, in whites. In Black people, you don't see kids that much of a gain. So you see, previously I showed you that they remain at risk of depression and low GPA. Now you are seeing that their inhibition also follows the same pattern. So I'm getting closer to a construct that explains that. This is reward responsiveness. So in a BIS, the measurement of how much reward is important for you, so you can measure reward responsiveness. High educated Black kid in a highly educated family stays at risk, or risk defining, I'm not sure if it is exclusively risk, but dependence on reward. You really want to get the reward. This is working memory. And again, on top, the smaller one sees that as your parental education improves, your working memory improves overall. If we don't see if you are white or Black or what racial category. But when we see for whites, that is the bottom, very nice stepwise benefit from your parental education on working memory, but not really much for Black kids. So for Black kids, that enhancement of working memory as a part of parental education is disrupted. This is very interesting. In this study, I also looked at the same pattern for income, and I didn't find the same disruption for income. And when I controlled for income, the interaction between race and parental education disappeared. That to me provides an evidence suggesting that maybe one reason Black kids' working memory in highly educated family is not as good as their white counterparts is because their highly educated Black parents are not making the same money. So that means labor market discrimination, being raised in poverty, and Black psychological tax, and all those type of processes. This is also the same for the association between a parental education, household income, and surface area of cerebral cortex, overall surface area of cortex in the ABCD study. And here, as you see, if you have a highly educated parent, you are more likely to have, or you have larger cortical surface area. But that is not clearly seen for Black kids with the statistically significant interactions. Why? Because the Black parent is fighting racism. Being busy fighting racism doesn't give you time to read a book for your kid. I have a very good mentor at Columbia, and who said for a Black family to make like 100K income, that takes 2 jobs, 3 jobs, but not necessarily for a white family. So it's easier to make the same income for white families. So if that is the case, then you would see diminished parenting and parental investment because of the social structure and stratification. Also, your kids is still sent to worse school and is living in worse neighborhoods. So you see the association between parental education and cortical surface area is also racialized. These are statistical interactions that I talked about. So you see that as your parental education enhances, you see like a stepwise enhancement in cortical surface area, but that comes with a penalty for that gain if you are a Black kid. There is a literature that maybe one reason behind all these things is not just bad school quality, is also discrimination by teachers, because teachers are not well prepared to know and understand like a behavior of a Black kid, and just not blaming that, okay, this kid is violent, especially if the kid is tall or large. So there is a good literature on the role of teacher discrimination against Black kids' success at schools. In this paper, I looked at if there is a correlation between amygdala volume and self-report of behavioral problem by teacher. So ABCD has asked parents and teachers and that how good this kid is behaving. And we know that amygdala volume and function correlate with emotion regulation and behavioral domain. So if teachers are biased against Black kids, then you would see a diminished return of the size of amygdala volume on the report of the problem behavior of the kid by the teacher. And you see that. So you see a correlation for white kids, but you don't see a correlation. So teachers are reporting high behavioral problem of their Black students, regardless of the kid's amygdala volume. For white kid, as amygdala volume goes up, the teacher is saying this kid is behaving much better. So that might be in part because of teacher discrimination. So all these, now I'm done with the reporting all these different pieces. What does this whole thing mean? First of all, it is oversimplistic to reduce health inequality to a mediational model that if you provide access, you can undo inequalities. It's far beyond that. Because of the structural things, you do not see the same. So if you have a magic wand and you get the power and the money and go change one thing like education, you wouldn't be able to undo these, because these highly educated Black people are then moving to labor market and being discriminated in the labor market, then working in a worse occupation and still living in poor neighborhoods and all those. So it is, one message is, it's not that simple and it is not that one-dimensional solution. The second one is that, so what should be the solution? First of all, the solutions should go beyond poverty elimination and should address structural racism. So should guarantee the same experience of resourced Black person and resourced white person. This is very interesting because we have been, for years, we have been having this belief that there is a vulnerable group that if you provide the resource for them, their outcome would drastically enhance. This is the amount of resource you need for the same improvement is more than what you had in mind. You need to invest more. So because when you introduce a new policy, if the policy is universal, there is a chance that the haves get more of it than the have-nots. The disadvantage has a stigma, doesn't access it, doesn't know how to negotiate and navigate, and need to get transportation to the employment and all of those. Another thing is that it's diminished return is not a Black phenomenon. It is not even a race-related phenomenon. It is marginalization-related phenomenon. So if you are immigrant, you have white skin. If you are white and you are LGBT, if you are Asian American, the model minority. So that was a very good example. What is happening to Asian Americans these days is a very good example that hate is there, that the system is waiting to discriminate. So now there is something some people call Wuhan virus, and then there is a beating against Asian Americans. So another implication of this finding is that health disparity fight shouldn't be specific to the lowest part of the socioeconomic status. You will see some larger, not narrowed disparities in middle class people. So I always say there might be larger health inequality in Hollywood than Walmart. So if you are working at Walmart, the white person is making the same money and is getting the same insurance as you if you are white or black. But that the difference is when you are in a high paid, like if you are CEO, if you are a very high quality employee, you are far less likely to become a chair of a department or become a senator or those powerful positions. So it is health disparity is also a part of the middle class in the United States. So we need to do something about urban schools because education generates less outcomes. We need to do something about labor market. We want to make sure that there is no discrimination in labor market. Proximity to whites for middle class blacks is showing an association with discrimination. So black kids who are living in predominantly white areas are having some difficulties, not saying that not let them live in white areas, but let's do something about it. So again, I'm not saying that any of these associations or differential associations are biological. They are all, in my mind, socially structured and socially shaped. I'm also not saying that as socioeconomic status is not generating a lot of outcomes, let's stop investing in those marginalized communities. That is the worst conclusion you can come to. I am saying they are not enough. I'm not saying, okay, if you have a resource, go give it to white people because high resource white people would show outcome. I say do more than providing resource for black people and all marginalized group. So I discussed some of the mechanisms. Okay, these diminished returns describe racism in a system that doesn't require a racist actor. So the system is designed in a way that even if you get an education and even if you live in a white area or you are still not securing the outcome. So, and because it is regardless of the resource or the outcome, it reflects a structural racism. Because a structural racism means when racism influences you without needing a racist actor like frowning at you or a teacher who discriminates you. So I find these findings as evidence for a structural racism. They are against bootstrap ideology again. They suggest that it's a very simplistic way to say marry if you want or wish a good outcome, postpone your childbearing, get an education and get an employment, because all of those generate unequal outcomes under racism. So I think I'm done with the presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Shervin. So We're a bit over time, but I think we can maybe make a little time for a couple of questions if anyone have them. Really thought-provoking and really bold stuff. So thanks for sharing that with us today. I really appreciate it. Are there any questions from the audience? Yeah, Anjay?
Hello, thank you, Dr. Assari, for your talk. It's very, very informative. So I'm understanding that the focus of your research is focused on really countering the bootstrap ideologies and focused on combating the victim blaming component. And the talk focused so much around where the protective effects go down with, across socioeconomic status, across education, all of these components. I'm wondering, especially from a public policy perspective, if there are silver linings emerging from the research where the protective effects are increasing or counter to that trend in general.
I'm not sure if I'm understanding. So you agree that there is some evidence suggesting that the return of education in economic outcome and the behavioral outcome and health outcomes are diminished. So are you asking the policy solutions for that, or are you asking the mechanisms for that diminished return?
I think what I was asking is if there were areas in which you saw positive protective effects emerge from within there.
Yes, good. Yes, I have seen. Okay, so almost any study that has looked at, or almost any study which I am aware of, and has looked at differential association of supportive relations and health outcomes, have reported Black advantage and white disadvantage. The same is true for any study that I am aware of, which has looked at differential association between different aspects of religion involvement and health outcomes. So that suggests not only Black people are more likely to engage in supportive relations and religion. Each unit incremental increase in social relations and religion aspects, because religiosity has its own science, like religious coping, perceived religiosity, a lot of things. So all those nuances would have larger protective effect for Black people compared to white. Like I can say there are 10 or more publications using different data sets by different people. Neil Krauss, Karen Lincoln, Robert Taylor, Linda Chatters, these people have shown that non-economic outcomes that may have been used historically to undo, so have become a refuge for, like, okay, I see racism, who I can leverage? My family. Where I can rely? My church. So we see larger protective effect of social relations and religion involvement on health outcomes to the disadvantage of white and advantage of Black people. But there is an issue, is that the religion is not that much a modifiable factor. So you see a good resilience attached with religion, but you cannot prescribe it. So it becomes more difficult to use that Black advantage in a randomized clinical trial. But there is a Black-white mental health paradox, or Black mental health resilience, that is widely published. And they have shown that, for example, why people are experiencing poverty, but still reporting better mental health than their white peer. I have proposed that this Black mental health paradox, Black-white mental health paradox, it can be explained by marginalization diminished return, because it is also saying that, okay, if low SES Black people and high SES Black people are not that much different in their depression or psychological distress, it's not just because poverty doesn't influence that much. It is because coming out of poverty gives them less leverage or boosts their mental health less frequently. So, but there is an advantage of Black communities when you look at differential effects for social relations and religion involvement.
Thanks, Shervin. Are there any other questions? I know we're running late, but if there's one last question, I hope hopefully Shervin wouldn't mind sticking around to answer it. Are there any ones? So I have one maybe final one then. So you did mention this in your concluding slides, that you do see this across sex and gender. So can you maybe talk a little bit more about, maybe this is a whole other talk you could be giving, but the interaction of sex and gender on some of the findings you presented today?
Yes. So one thing is that I told you even age loses some of the predictive functions that it is supposed to, like for aspirin. That is the same for gender. So in white people, you see a large sex or gender gap in prevalence of depression. You don't see that in Black people. That means the protective effect of being a male against depression, that is a widely described phenomenon in white people, it doesn't replicate in Black people. So I see it as diminished return of male sex when you look at the depression for Black people. But why many of these findings that I have observed are more strong for Black boys and Black men? The reason seems to be like, if you are Black, you are more likely to integrate, to adopt, to, for example, when you go to Walmart, when we look at the intersection of race and sex or gender, we see more Black women working there. When you go to an academia, we see, or Senate, we see more Black women integrated to the US society. And when we measure anti-Black discrimination, we see highest level of anti-Black discrimination acted by white male. This is published papers. There are published papers acted by white males against Black males. So it is, and they say it is a male target hypothesis. So male of one group historically has been afraid of the males of other group coming to their tribe. So for that reason, they say intergroup conflict is mainly a male toward male problem. Harvard, other institutions have published on that. So if that is the case, I can also explain why I don't see some of these diminished returns for Black females, but I see them in Black males. So there is a sex by race interaction for diminished returns.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time, and thank you so much for sharing these really thought-provoking findings with us. Greatly appreciated.